White House Budget Director Mick Mulvaney joins us from Washington for an interview you'll see only on CBS This Morning. Good morning to you, Mr. Mulvaney. Thanks for joining.
Thanks. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for joining us. So Congress is starting to work out the differences between the House and the Senate bill. Can you tell us what the president wants to see now?
Sure, the same thing that we've wanted to see from the very beginning, which is sort of these two fundamental principles from the White House perspective. Number one, ordinary, hardworking Americans will pay less, and it will be simpler for them to pay. And number two, this corporate tax rate will come down. It looks like both the House and the Senate bills that have now passed preserve those two very important principles. So the next step is to work out the details. The House has some things the Senate doesn't have, and vice versa. This is part of the ordinary course of business in passing law, but we do like to see the progress that's going on, and still on goal for getting this done by Christmas.
Well, let me ask you this. Does the president favor 7 rates or 4 rates?
We favor whatever can pass. We'd like a simpler code, keeping in mind that the number of rates doesn't really change the simplicity of the code for ordinary folks. They're just simply going to turn to the booklet in the back of the tax book and fill out their taxes. So it's going to be very simple for individual, ordinary Americans, regardless of how many rates there are. So as between the 4 or 5 rates that were in the House bill, the 6 or 7 in the Senate bill, we're really indifferent.
It sounds like you're saying the president doesn't mind much what's in the bill. He just wants a bill.
No, not at all. I said we want a bill that preserves our principles. And so far, these bills both have those things. So we're very excited about the progress. No, it's not a bill for the sake of passing a bill. We need the substance of this. But those two principles are what have been driving the White House from the very beginning.
Well, let me ask you about one of the president's principles, because during the campaign, he called the national debt, quote, weight around the future of every young person in this country. I mean, is the president concerned that this is going to add $1.4 trillion to the debt?
Listen, the debt continues to be a priority for the White House. I hope that I still have a reputation for being a deficit hawk, for a fiscal hawk. I think it's the reason the president hired me for this job. But keep in mind, the deficit is a function of two different things, the amount of revenues into the government and the amount of revenues out. So revenues and spending. We need this tax bill to grow the economy. A healthy American economy where everybody works, folks make more money, actually generates more money for the government coffers. So one of the ways we're hoping to reduce the deficit over the long term is by having this tax bill passed.
Both bills aim at repealing the estate tax, of course, which targets the nation's wealthiest. Last week, Republican Senator Chuck Grassley told the Des Moines Register, "I think not having the estate tax recognizes the people that are investing as opposed to those that are just spending every darn penny they have, whether it's on booze or women or movies." So let me ask you, is that a fair characterization of 99.9% of U.S. households?
No, I'm not sure where that's coming from. On the estate tax, we would like to see it go away. We do not think that dying should invite the IRS into your life. Right now, when you pass away, it's a taxable event, a taxable transaction. We just don't think that's right. We do believe long-term in taxing the assets that families have collected over the generations. We just don't think it should be at the point of death.
Now, the Senate bill would repeal the Obamacare individual mandate. That's something that CBO says would leave 13 million Americans without insurance. Is the president okay with that?
Think about that for a second. So what the CBO is telling you is, as soon as the government tells you you don't have to buy something, you're not going to. Is that necessarily a bad thing? I mean, do we really want to have some law on the books? This goes back to the underlying issue of health care, while at the same time recognizing that the Democrats have pitched health care as a tax, so it's entirely appropriate to be dealing with that now. Should the government really be telling you, forcing you to buy something you don't want to buy? We're absolutely comfortable with that. We're glad the Senate finally got around to repealing the individual mandate. The House had done it previously in a separate bill, so we're looking forward to that possibly being part of the final legislation.
So both bills have a cut for the corporate tax rate down to 20%. The president has said he could go up to 22%. You have some Republican senators that want to do that because they say they could help more middle-class families if you just increased it a couple percentage points. Is that something where there could be negotiation?
Sure. Again, we liked 15% to begin with. We love that 20%. But if it takes a smaller change in there to get this across the finish line, we're willing to work on the details with both the House and the Senate. Keep in mind, it's not just us that the Senate is negotiating with. They have to negotiate with the House as well.
All right. Mick Mulvaney, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, y'all. Have a great morning.